Are you curious about a career as a UX designer and trying to figure out, well, what exactly is it that they do? Well, let's just ask the user experience designer himself. With his own practice as a brand marketing strategist, I'm sure that Stefan has a thing or two that he can teach us about what to expect in this role. Enjoy. What is UX design?
Well, Steve Jobs said, design is not just what it looks like and feels like. Design is how it works. Now, before even Steve
Oh,
Jobs had that statement, my grandfather was a carpenter, and well, a carpenter amongst other things. He had a different. He wore many hats, but he would create guitars right in work shed right next to the house. I mean, from scratch. I mean, bending the wood with fire and everything like that. And he was a master carpenter. I mean, compared to who I've ever seen before. And he always said that the parts on the outside don't. The parts on the outside is nice. It looks good, but the most important part of it is inside. Is the components inside, how it
mm,
works, and you make sure that the parts inside are more expensive than the parts on the outside. Now
oh,
that stuck with me because it's not something that someone sees on the outside. Like they care about the they care about the appearance of it, right?
whoa.
So now, my grandfather didn't know Steve Jobs, but I knew my grandfather, and what he taught me when it came to that, and as well as with Steve Jobs, is that the essence of design always goes beyond the aesthetics, and it delves into the functionality of the overall user experience of a product or service, right?
Mm.
Now, the concept of measure twice, cut once. That's the most important thing. It means when you're looking at something, you have to um, test, understand the data before you execute. And that's how it relates to design. User experience is
Oh,
a field that is mostly it's mostly about making sure that when someone uses a product or service, that those things are addressed. So a
okay.
person is using an app or using a website, you're paying attention to the information, if information architecture of it. What's going to cause a person friction when they're going through the links and making sure that they
Oh,
get to where they need to get to? What's stopping them? What's causing friction is what they say. What's causing noise when you're choosing a product, and these things are um, thought of, I mean, meticulously. And that's, I would say, I'm not saying that it's in a nutshell, but that's one of the aspects of it.
I was not expecting that answer. I'm
Okay.
gonna be honest with you, man. I didn't expect the answer to have that kind of depth, right? Because that was convicting. It was because I think like that in my personal life, Stefan.
Hmm.
With your grandfather, man, that's so powerful, bro. The parts on the inside need to be more expensive than the parts on the outside, right? And and even for me, that's a war that I go with when I'm producing content because it's the side of me that has an ability to know how to be savvy and I can make it look like a certain way, man, but I'm like, dang, I don't want to put out more than what I can actually deliver, right? So I try to stay within my means to make sure that I'm functioning with integrity. And it just sounds like your grandfather was just a solid man of integrity, man, right? That's integrity. So
Definitely.
that's powerful. So now, all right, so tell me more then.
Hmm.
Like give me like walk me through an example of what a UX designer would do on a job.
So one example would be in the medical fields of what it is, which is where which was the part of it I think I would say I liked that part the most about doing UX in medical, because it's designed. for the benefit of humankind. I like being part of projects that actually push the needle forward in humanity and
Mm,
help save lives. That's actually why I actually jumped into the last role that I did.
okay.
So imagine in a hospital, you're going, a patient's on a bed and they're dying and they need to get the fluids, or say the fluids faster, or in a efficient way. This is in the medical field, as you know, in those situations, time is the difference between life or death, right?
Right.
So when they're interacting with that machine on the side, a nurse needs to be able to um, give the this like a saline solution in a certain increments. Like, it needs to be like a point 0.5 increment here, or I'm messing the numbers up, but
Right.
it
Right.
needs to
Right.
be in a there are equations that have to be programmed into how the liquids are delivered to the patient.
Right. Right.
There's
Right.
timing. There needs to be things in place to stop if this is too much, this can't work. So let's say there are two solutions, like for that sense. So a UX designer now has to make sure that that process, when a nurse is coming in, new or old, can still use those things, and use those things accurately, because it's a matter of life or death for a patient, right?
Okay.
So you're going into basically designing a device that has, the buttons need to be clear, the text needs to be clear, it needs to have a certain color, they need to be a certain width, they need to have rounded,
Oh,
the even the radiuses on the corners and stuff like that need to be specific. And funny as it is, when it comes to the medical industry, you can't change it too much, and that's a big part of it, because one of the things that is important for when a user is interacting with a device, is how familiar they are with it. If you have a device now that you're going into, I work at the hospital in Atlanta, and now I have to work at a hospital in Philadelphia. I'm moving from hospital to hospital, and the device is different for what I need in order to save someone's life.
mm.
Have a problem, that is actually an error in design. It needs to be able to be comfortable. So it's funny, because when you see devices, when you see like the devices on phones and for different things, they're always trying to change the interface. A perfect example would be Samsung and Apple. Apple, if you realize, when they change their OS, they when they change their OS, they change their UX. Their changes are incremental. You see
Mm.
little things, and it's not that Apple is lazy. Apple is just paying attention to UX. It's paying attention to, like, if you had a iPhone 8 and you jumped into a 14, the changes aren't that far away that you would be confused. Samsung, on the other hand, they make changes on the fly. They don't. I want to say that they care, but I would like to say that they don't care as much as Apple does when it comes to it. And this is not a bash for both. I
No, I
always
get
carry
you
both
bringing
of
the
them.
clarity.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's important that they do that. They make the income. They make tiny changes as they go. They would have features of something for years ahead, and Samsung is using it right now, but they're not ready to use it in that way. Apple Pay is a perfect example. When Apple Pay when Apple Pay came to Apple, Samsung has been using it for years to do touch technology, right? Touch technology. Now, it was in Samsung phones for years, and then they started making jokes. Oh, Apple, why are you not? Apple's so late to the game. They're not even using it correctly. And Apple, could be marketing, could be just in their brand, their in their brand mission. It's a rebel. They like to be rebellious in the way they think and do things. It's one of their core things that people don't even understand. They don't want to do what everyone does. They want to make sure that if they did it, it sounds like they did it first, or they did it a different way. They don't care if you're complaining about it. They're going to do it in their way. So took it and changed it for their device. You can't do that just like that with that same technology. They use it in Apple Pay instead. So I hope I didn't veer off, because what I'm trying to say is that when it comes to UX itself, it's just it's kind of deep in a sense, where it's just focusing on the steps and making sure that someone has a great experience when they're engaging with a product, and
No.
its inclusivity also considered.
So, all right. No, you're right. You spot on. So you bring up two questions to mind. The amount of detail that goes into the role. One, I wonder what kind of background, like, does a person have to get into this? Like, how do you prepare yourself to, to work in a user experience, or I'm saying it right, user experience role? And the other question I got, I don't want to jump the gun, but I'm trying to figure out, is user experience only dealing with the technological side of something? So like how you say in the hospital, the user experience designer would create how the function of the screen or the buttons is a certain way to make sure there's a smoother process. So UX, is that like only dealing with like an interface on an electronic device, or is it outside of that? And then the other question I have is, how do you get into that? Like, what type of education do you need, or preparation do you need to even start setting yourself up to understand that role?
User experience is not just it's not just on the technical side of things. User experience, and one of the examples is a ketchup bottle, right? When Heinz created the first ketchup bottles, um, you would have it upright, where the top of the ketchup bottle is on the top. It's a small spout on the top. You click it, you squirt your ketchup on your hot dogs. That's nice, right?
Right.
So you have that ketchup, like one ketchup bottle. But then later on, they created a ketchup bottle that was upside down, and the cap was at the bottom, and the ketchup could flow down, because they paid attention to how the users would interact with the bottle,
Wow.
and what would make it easier to get the ketchup. Because you pour ketchup out, and it's sometimes stuck at the bottom, you lose ketchup. But when you want to pour your ketchup out, it's probably easier for the user to just pop. Forgive the sound effects,
Yo.
right? So user experience involves that,
Man.
like it involves that thinking process, where how do I make this easier? So in the last company I worked, I loved it because we delved into every part of it. And the thing about medical, as I said, medical UX, it's not rewarding. It's not as rewarding as other designs, other UX industries, because the stuff that we get to create, you don't really get to see, because there's always non-disclosures. You can't show it. I mean,
Oh.
I'm talking about, let's say you're getting a home test. This also answers what you're asking, because you asked if it's only technology, and I think you asked if it's only technology,
Yeah.
and how UX actually relates. So you get a home test for COVID, right? That whole process is mapped out, storyboard, as in how is the user going to use this? At what point do they verify it's the right person? At what point do they take the device? And we delved into every part of that. I mean, 3D printing the product and making sure that when the person gets it, how is their hands actually going to hold on to it? I
Oh.
mean, everything. And that's what I loved. Or like even a device in the carts that you see in the hospitals, where the handles are, you're holding your handles. If an accident were to happen, where it's an earthquake and that had to roll to you, right? What would happen if that rolled into the wall? What would that happen if it rolled into a person, and the handle part actually could injure you or stop you? That has to be redone. So it's like it's to that point where you're doing research, making sure that how could we make this better for someone, right?
Wow.
It's to that point. So to answer the second question of what qualifies a person to be a UX designer, you have to have a high capacity for empathy or um, emotional intelligence. Emotional
Ooh.
intelligence to me, I had a mentor and I didn't really even know what emotional intelligence was. I knew I was. He said, "You act with a lot of emotional intelligence." His name was William Davies. He was like a father to me. He was really great. And when I realized that emotional intelligence is just basically standing outside of the situation itself, taking yourself out, being unbiased, standing in the person's shoes, how would that person interact with the situation? What would you do? Asking yourself those questions. It's like standing outside of it. Like imagine having an argument with someone and then you pause and you're like, well, I can see why that person feels this way. Now let
Wow.
me give an answer. And a lot of people can't handle that because they can't stand outside of themselves. So if you don't have the capacity to be able to be objective, you don't have the capacity to be outside or emotional intelligence. This is not something that you can do because you have to think about what the customer customer's experience is, the user experience, and how you can make that better. How you can make sure that when they're doing it and internally they're smiling because it's so easy, and now they want to use that app 100 times.
Wow. Okay. A quick insert.
Yes.
When a person Googles like UX, it's
Hmm.
typically like UX/UI or UI/UX. User interface the UI and
Hmm.
UX is user experience. Just a quick like, are they the same or what's like the difference between user or is there such thing as a user interface designer? Like, what's the difference between the two?
UX is the thought process. User experience. UX is the thought process. Is the part that deals with the intelligence. It's the part that deals with the strategy of how that is done. User interface is actually now focusing on making sure the interface, you're designing the interface, you're focused on the wireframes, you're making sure that those buttons, the look, the feel, everything like that matches the user experience, the strategy or the map of what that is.
Okay, bad. Whoa, bro, I'm tripped out right now, Stefan. You actually, you got me intrigued. I'm like, dang, like, do I kind of want to get some education in the UX arena? Like, for real, man. It just seems like it's a beneficial tool in
It is,
understanding, right?
it is in a way, it is. And I have a strong design background. So for me, it's more like I love branding. And as I said, my core is in identity. And because I understand identity, I can understand marketing, customer experience also. And those things are what drew me to UX design. I fell into UX by accident when someone asked me to design.
Mm.
I I fell into UX when someone asked me to design a landing page for an app. I designed a landing page, and then they were like, "Hey, this was really good. Can you check to see if you can do the screens?" And then I started digging into it. Now this was informal, informal of how I did it. And when I did it, uh, I succeeded. I loved it. And later on, I started working on apps, like different apps and stuff like that. And that's where I fell into it. But it is different. It is definitely different from. It's different, and it is connected. It's all connected to what how you approach regular design. Regular
Okay.
design, you can make something pretty. It looks good. You use fonts and make sure it falls into the hierarchy of design. Oh, that
Mm.
works. Okay, good. But it's still that also is still UX because you're still making sure that when someone sees this word, what is the distance around that? What is the font? Is the contrast correct? Like is this is look good? Is this going to be adapted by that person when they get that flyer, that business card, that any element, and are they going to feel the brand trust or the identity of the company when they touch it, engage with it? It's all in the same bracket because it's still making sure that the experience of the person, um, is going through is on point and in line with the brand identity and brand strategy that you have.
All
So,
right. You tripping me out, bro. Like, okay. I'm interested in this, right? Because now as a content creator, as someone who is establishing a brand, I'm listening to somebody like you do this. And I'm like, dang, okay, how could someone like Stefan like benefit like my organization? Because you're going into a depth to where I think about this on the surface level, but I don't understand it. I
right,
don't understand how to actually make my marketing side effective with as much substance that I would like to bring someone to point A to point B of experiencing what they actually came to experience.
right.
So and I don't want to make the interview too long. I want you to touch on because I believe you told me earlier that you do branding. I want you to touch on that. I want you to touch on what you do from a branding standpoint and just kind of talk a little bit with how that ties into UX.
Hmm.
Where does that come into play? And I still want after that, I still want to kind of just touch on before we close out what can that journey look like for somebody who wants to do what you're talking about? Someone who wants to do UX. Is it one way? Is it more about experience? Is it about them getting their hands into some type of mentoring or educational platform? Is it a degree? What is it? But first, just tell me about what do you do from a branding standpoint and just kind of maybe connect that to UX or marketing and just where does that fit in?
Okay. So now, I don't know if I mentioned before, but there are the different experiences are like a CX, BX, there's SX. So CX is a customer service experience. BX is the brand experience. UX, is the user experience. Now, how that ties in when I approach a client when it comes to branding, we dig into understanding what your brand is. Because you may think your brand is one way. Let's say a client comes in and says, I love purple. I like this. I think my brand should represent a pony because my grandfather had a pony and I want to ride ponies. Heh, right? That's what
Straight
they
up.
want to do. But they may not know what their brand is. And they won't know unless they do some research. So let's say if I were to do a surface assessment of what your brand is, right? Now you're on your journey and you're in your journey, tech journey, and you are moving forward, trying to make sure you build the exposure as you're going, recording the elements of it and stuff like that. But a person may see your brand and say, "Wow, this is a sharp brother. He's doing his thing. He's building his family. He's going forward. He's jumping into tech." Right? But they don't know the purpose. Maybe
Mm,
your purpose is to build um, generational wealth. So now the things that you've been doing is actually building on generational wealth. They see you as, he's just trying to shed light on the tech industry and or what field you should go into. But they don't know that the core of your brand, the purpose of your brand, or your brand voice is intertwined with building generational wealth. So
mm,
even though you're doing this, it may not mean that in 3 years you are actually doing this still. Your
mm,
core might have been building generational wealth. So
mm.
you jumped into stocks or you just saw something and you jumped into real estate. So what you think your brand is, you may not know what your brand is because you're not digging into the psychology of why you're doing it, what your brand voice is, what you want your customers to feel, how you want them to interact with you when they see you, or what you want them to talk about. And those are the elements of what a brand really is. So the brand itself, it's so a lot of people don't know this. And once we have discovery sessions, that's when they realize that, wow, I really thought my brand was this way, and it's not. A current client we have right now, she thought her brand was her product. Meanwhile, she's an amazing writer. She has an amazing story, and she didn't even realize that she is the brand. And everything else
Oh,
is just the elements of that brand. So that's where it comes to in sense what I do for branding. That's what we do. We dig deep, we find out what those elements are, and we then establish what the brand really is. And it really never is what you think it is. Not
right,
never, but it really rarely is it what you
right.
think it is. It's what your customers say it is. It's what your customers relate to you when it comes to your brand. Perfect
Oh,
example is Amazon. Amazon has the 2 day had the 1 day shipping, 2 day shipping, and Amazon has everything that you want. In fact, their logo is Amazon, and the arrow goes from A and it ends at Z, because what they said is we have everything from A to Z. Funny as it is, that's not even the strongest point of their brand. You know, when you go to Amazon, yeah, you can get everything, but their strongest point of their brand was in their CX, their customer experience. You knew that when you went to Amazon, you could get something tomorrow or 2 days. And that's one thing. You ask somebody, where you like Amazon? Oh, I could get out in like 2 days, right? When
right.
they even changed it, they actually changed it, but people don't even know that. They changed it. It's not 1 or 2 days anymore. It's you can get it, but they're not promising you that you can get it in 1 or 2 days. Some products take a month to get you. Some products take 2, 3 weeks. But that's not what the customers are attached to. They're attached to the fact that it was branded that you could get it in 1 to 2 days. So branding side of it is you dig deep and you find out what are those aspects that make the customer say, this is why I love that. Building the brand trust, building the brand voice. When you say what you say, it has to align with what your brand voice and your values are. So now, branding aside, UX does the same thing in a sense when it comes to how the user interacts with your stuff, like how the user interacts with those branding elements. So let's say a branding element of yours is your app. How are users jumping on there? And if you say now, if you have an app now and you have all these um, things, paywalls, ads, and stuff like that, what does a user usually do?
Mm,
They get off, right?
right, no doubt.
I don't like this. I feel like this is so like gimmicky. You're trying to get my money. I can't believe they did that. That's
Oh,
what they would say. I can't believe they did that. I trust this brand. I can't believe they did that. Right?
wow, that's true.
So your experience should flow from what your brand attributes are, your brand voice, your promises are. It should flow to your products. It should feel that way. That's why when you see a luxury brand, let's say you see a luxury brand, when you see their business card, you know that their business card shouldn't be cheap, because they spent so much money on the product here that when you feel it, it translates. It's continued in the little pieces of their brand. It's continued. So
Wow.
UX now makes makes sure that it's continuing that aspect of branding. It should, and that's why when it comes to the way I approach UX, I approach it from that aspect. Meanwhile, I know that there are UX designers, which no shade to any UX designers. I know that when they approach it, they jump in. Some people jump into UX with no experience, no design experience. They just want the money and they jump into it. It's, oh, let's just make this. It looks pretty. It's good. Okay, boom. I followed all the check marks. It's good. Let's do it. Let's keep it moving. You know,
Wow.
and a big part of it is what does the stakeholder want? They want this. Stakeholders usually are drenched in marketing. So they want it fast, they don't care, and they want to get it out. Now, that's fine. And we spoke about imperfect steps before, right? It's
Right.
important to just sometimes execute. It's important to focus on an agile workflow compared to a waterfall workflow. It's important to be fast.
Right. Right.
But what happens, even with clients, they rush through that process and still have to go back to branding, because they're now trying to understand, why aren't the customers or new customers still interacting with my product? Why are my numbers going down? And it's because they didn't focus on the branding at the top of the chain and then get those things in part. And I'm just trying to stay true to it. And that's why I like UX. That's why I'm that's why I love UX, and that's why I'm trying my best to make sure I understand everything of it, even as it changes, because things change tomorrow. AI is out, AR is out, Meta is out, everything like that, and it changes with everything that is introduced. It takes the workflow and everything to a different level.
Wow.
Hopefully, I answered that question correctly.
Yeah, you answered it. You did that, man. Okay. Okay. God, I got to wrap this up. This is just so good, man. It's so insightful. And you do you have like your own practice too doing branding,
Yes.
Stefan? You do. All right. I'm gonna have your info. It's gonna be on the screen right now. Probably I'm gonna have it in the description. It's gonna be there for anybody who looking at this, because this is just so valuable.
Oh,
It's
thank
so
you.
beneficial. Um, in terms of the pathway there, right? So, and I'm curious
Mm-hmm.
because one of the main company as of now, time of this recording, that our brand that we more so affiliate and partner with, Course Careers, they have now a user experience, user interface. They got the curriculum,
Yes.
and the curriculum is $499,
Mm-hmm.
right? That's before any discount. And historically speaking, they've had the sales route and IT and other things. And one thing that I'm genuinely curious about is understanding the effectiveness that this could contribute to someone or
Right.
not,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
So what does the journey or the pathway to UX look like? Is it only a certain way that a person has to go, that industries or companies are like allowing people into this space? Or is it more about labs, or what you can prove that you understand, or the knowledge that you bring to the table? Just kind of, just in your opinion, just as someone who's in the space, like, what does that journey into this space look like?
All right. So I'm gonna answer it from a couple of different directions.
Okay.
Now, being a person who has I've been drenched in sales, right? Got taught by this. I've been doing sales for a couple of years, and one part I would say, even it was being taught by like a Harvard program on how sales should be executed, and almost had my own office. I was part of a team with where we trained sales reps, and we were in 6 months we were on track to have our own offices and run teams. These were Spartans. Now,
Okay.
being a part of that and understanding just sales in that sense, I had a look at Course Careers program, and my wife, coincidentally, she went through the program and was a beast at it. She had 100 in all of the tests that came across,
Oh,
and then
it couldn't be no other way, man.
she ran through it. And in her process of just learning, it was meticulous. It was perfect in a sense. Nothing is perfect, but it was effective.
Right.
A lot of the things that they taught sales reps, they're creating Spartans in the sales field, and I loved it so much so that I still want to actually do it for myself, just because I'm a student of life. I like learning. I want to learn everything.
Wow.
So,
Okay.
um, now paying attention to that with the price point of what the Course Careers SDR program is. I actually would love to do the UX just to see what you're being taught,
Hmm.
right? Now, here's a difference. Like you can go to college, and my master's degree costs a lot more than that. I mean, how many times I could fit into that bucket? It's ridiculous, right? In UX.
Woo.
So imagine getting and they say sometimes those boot camps are great, right? Like boot camps and stuff like that are great. But I'm very intrigued to see what course careers would do when it comes to UX. And that's why I would love to try it, because I want to learn something new. You have to keep your mind open. You have to be teachable when it comes to this, in sales and as well as UX or any field. You have to be teach. If you have a ceiling, when it
Mm,
comes to learning something, you would never be able to grow. So that's why I don't mind learning something 3 or 4 times. I swear to you, you'd learn something different,
wow,
every time you do it, or it just reinforces what you know. So in terms of that, I think I'm hoping I answered your question when it comes to that.
you
When
did,
it comes to course careers, what was the other part of your question? You said, what was the other part of your question?
bro. The stuff you said was so good. I think you answered it all.
Right. I think you asked, would you like, should you do it, in a sense, like you're looking at it like, would you do it or should you do it? I don't see it. I don't think it hurts because that price point
Yeah.
is so low.
Okay.
Course careers, I'm not saying you should change your price, keep your price the way it is, until maybe
Yeah.
until I'm done with it. But it's so low that I would love to see what they do because of how well I think they did with the sales, the SDR
Okay.
side of it.
Yeah. No.
Right.
And I, you answered it. It's your perspective because
Yes.
you're saying a
Objectively
lot,
speaking.
huh? What you,
Objectively speaking.
yeah,
Yeah.
you're saying a lot right now, Stefan, and you're reminding me of the importance of being willing to continue learning. Because one thing that I look to stress, and I hope I do an okay job with it in other videos on our platform. When it comes to going to a course careers, any other boot camp, whatever, it's not about them getting you a job. It's not
Hmm.
about, oh, I'm gonna enroll in this and then I'm gonna have a no, it is a part of the process of putting yourself in a better position, but ultimately you gotta go get the job.
Yeah.
It's about your work ethic, it's about what you're putting in and in the perspective of how you answered it. Okay, well, I see the price point. I see they put out some good stuff before. Yeah. And you know what? I'm about educating myself. Because see, in your mindset, that's more like entrepreneur. It's like, I ain't looking for nobody to hand me nothing.
Hmm.
Okay, this is a tool that can put me in a better position that'll just benefit me. So I'll invest in that tool because
Yeah.
that'll contribute to where I'm going. So yeah,
Of course.
I dig that. Tech family, look, I know that if you done made it to this part, this was good. Make sure you follow Stefan, look him up. I'm gonna have his information in the description down bottom. And look, comment on the video. Let us know what you think. Let us know any additional questions that you have. And look, who knows? We might re-collaborate and look to come back and address some matters. And other than that, we'll see you on the next video. Thanks a bunch, Stefan. Greatly appreciate you, man.
Thanks for
Bringing,
having me, Oren.
yeah,
It's been an honor.
man. It's an honor, man. We appreciate the value you brought, bro. Y'all be blessed.